Hi, everybody. Welcome to Flywire Fireside Chats, where we're going to be sitting down with leaders and experts, as well as some really successful graduates from the international education space to talk about just the international student experience, as well as some tips and advice for how students can thrive when they study abroad. The goal for these chats is to provide an informal and relaxed discussion to give students and their families some sincere and honest insights into all that being an international student has to offer. So, without further ado, I will introduce our first guest, Rikhi Roy. If you want to just say a little bit about yourself, kind of, your background, where you're originally from, what you studied, and what you're working on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Rikhi, and I'm an international student from Singapore. I grew up in Malaysia and Thailand, and I was convinced I was going to go into a career in finance, possibly in London, until a plane went missing. It was the Malaysian Airlines plane that went missing back in 2014, and that's what catapulted me into the aerospace industry. And I've since been in this journey to make flying things safer. My journey as an international student was not uniquely challenging, but was challenging just as anyone else's journey. However, being in the aerospace industry, there are some particular challenges for any foreign national. And so, being at the intersection of being a gender minority and foreign national in aerospace led to a number of challenges pertaining to my well being and mental health, as it does with others at this intersection. And since then, I've been looking to create content on social media pertaining to uplifting other folks in this space so that we can focus on our mental health and well being while doing the really challenging and at the same time exciting things that we're passionate about so many miles away from home.
That's awesome. We'll get to talk a little bit more about that in a bit. First, I want to ask you, what led you to study abroad, right? You mentioned having a passion for aviation. Has that always been there? Is that kind of what drove that?
So I wasn't passionate about aviation until age 15. And even then, I believe I was more concerned about making a system safe than aviation itself. And so there were a number of um, cultural things that I encountered in the aerospace industry, such as being a minority, that I just didn't have insight into prior to joining the program. But since then, since I started in 2016, because of so many social media platforms talking about the experience, I'm sure that a number of students who are to follow the hashtag aerospace on any social media platform would be able to get um, a little bit more insight into what it's actually like.
Yeah.
And what led me to studying abroad, particularly, is that I'm really passionate about extracurriculars. And when I was applying, I applied in Singapore, in the UK, and in the United States, given that there are some of the best aerospace programs in all of these three spaces. And I received a number of acceptances from everywhere, but it really came down to the fact that I wanted to compete in Indian classical dancing, and there was a community in the United States that did so. In fact, my university, Georgia Tech, had one of the best Indian classical dance teams in the country and more broadly in North America. And so that's the sort of life that I wanted to pursue. And beyond that, Georgia Tech had one of the best design build fly clubs. In fact, they continued to win first and second place. So I was going into this program that would not only teach me aerospace engineering, but I could also dance and build unmanned aerial vehicles with some of the best teams in North America. And so I think it was this emphasis on wanting to be more than just the degree or more than just school that led me to studying in the United States, particularly.
Yeah, and remind me, right? Georgia Tech actually won a few competitions while you were there, didn't they?
Absolutely. So both the dance team and Design Build Fly would win first or second place consistently. And I think that was really interesting and insightful, particularly as a student leader in those spaces, to learn what it would be like to lead such a team, but to also just be a regular member and to follow on such a team.
Awesome. So that actually segues really good into what I wanted to ask you about next. You're obviously a really big advocate for uh, international students, particularly women in STEM, right? What are some things that, Ricky back in 2015, 2016, you wish that she had known before this whole experience started?
Absolutely. So, when applying, I think there's always a spectrum of universities based on the world rankings. And from the high school that I went to, there was a large emphasis placed on these world rankings. And I applied to the top 5 programs everywhere. And that's how I was advised and how I navigated my applications for my Common App as well as the one in the UK.
Mhm.
However, there are a number of scholarships that are awarded to international students that aren't necessarily in the top 5, but maybe are um, a little bit lower on the list that would still make really great programs that students might want to consider. So, my first piece of advice is to be curious and to talk to a lot of other international students who are pursuing the things that the student wants to pursue, and they can be found through LinkedIn at um, a number of universities that maybe a student has targeted, but there's such a spectrum of spaces where international students can receive money from that I thought that I wasn't eligible for just by virtue of being a foreign national.
Yeah.
And so my first piece of advice is being curious. And then the second one is being really intentional about introspection about what someone likes, what their strengths and weaknesses are, because I came into university with the assumption that the university would tell me and guide me on my journey. But coming to the United States, there was this um, culture and emphasis on individuality and making sure that you knew what you were going in to do and that it would be self guided. And I
Mhm.
simply didn't have that. Um, Context. A
Yeah.
really interesting example is that I only started mapping out the classes that I was going to be taking in my third year of school, which is something
Well,
that I think I should have done like at the end of high school. I didn't know any better. And so there's so many little things like that that students just don't know any better. And it's that focus on intentionality and introspection that can get them to unpacking questions that they wouldn't have otherwise happened on. And so that then leads to intense organization, and that's organizing your finances, that's organizing your class schedules, that's organizing your extracurriculars and what you choose to do. And hopefully that organization leads to the fourth thing, which is asking for help. And for me, I think that asking for academic help in particular to learn about what it is that makes an American student is really important. And you can swap out American for wherever in the world that you're going to study. But understanding the culture of the student there is really important because that is how you are being assessed. You're not assessed for being an international student, and none of your unique challenges are um, visible to the professor unless you let them know. And asking for help, such as academic coaching or even um, mental health services through your university, based on what is accessible through through insurance, is really important to get a proper support system that
Yeah.
is based of a network of professionals rather than just friends and family.
That is some advice I wish I had had going into college, even,
Absolutely.
especially, I mean, the intentionality, being organized, right? That's something that even as an adult is, even as, out here in the real world is something that's so important that, I wish I had heard that earlier. So I hope people are able to take away a lot from those 4 points. So the last thing that I want to ask you, right? You are a huge advocate for women in STEM, particularly women of color in STEM, and you've done a bit of everything, right? Conferences and webinars, videos, your blog, right, and all this content. What's next for you? What are you kind of most passionate about and working on?
So I've always loved listening to things such as TED Talks or going to conferences. And I always used to think that it was limited to conferences and TED Talks. But what I've learned about myself is that I'm really curious about people's stories and also excited about sharing people's stories. And so when I was in graduate school, I used to go on Instagram Lives with a number of minorities across STEM in various industries. But that was a baby step towards creating a more integrated media platform that helps to share these stories. And so, what I'm looking to do now is to share those Instagram lives along with new conversations I'll be recording on anywhere that you can listen to podcasts, as well as having the videos captured and shared on YouTube so that everyone can see the visual. The visual is so important because there's so many different shapes, sizes, colors of minorities out there who are all doing really exciting things. And it helps younger folks joining in these spaces to see that they can be here too. And so my current project is converting the content that I've already created into something that's more accessible because oftentimes Instagram lives are hard to replay and rewatch if you're on the go.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about this project because it means that a lot of people that didn't listen to these stories a year ago get to um, have another access point to it.
That's awesome. I think that's an amazing resource, not just for international students, but also just for anybody who's curious about the space and about kind of overcoming some adversities or breaking into spaces where they might not see people that look like them as often. Right?
Absolutely.
That's really incredible. So I guess in kind of parting words, right? Um, it's been awesome to have you and hear your story, your experience, the sage wisdom that you gave around the curiosity, intentionality, making a plan, and asking for help. And also, really amazing to hear what you're working on and kind of being an example for some international students and really anybody to look at and say, hey, she's doing it. Maybe I can too. So, thank you everybody for joining this first fireside chat with Rikhi Roy. Be sure to check her out and follow her. Some big things coming down the pipe for her, it sounds like. So, thank you again.
Thank you.